I'm Carol Angela Davis with your reality news check for Monday, August 8th, 2011. We're going to begin with your headlines. What is the real agenda of Standard & Poor's? We'll talk about that. Plus, those private jet owners and users spend a lot of money so they don't have to travel with you and I. Wait till you hear about the folks at the Tea Party and the Republicans don't want to tax. They're loaded. Also today, polygamist Warren Jeff seems to be a machine when it comes to sexual abuse. Here are the latest allegations from family members. Also today, a strike at Verizon, plus cybercrime and its enormous expense. And then finally, Christians. My, oh my, a new poll out says you are tending to violence. Here we go with your stories, beginning, of course, with the debt ceiling. All right, the furor continues over the nerve of Standard & Poor's to downgrade the nation's debt rating. In a column, here's what former U.S. Labor Secretary Robert Reich says about the S&P downgrade and the fact that the result of it is likely to be higher borrowing costs for the government at all levels. And that's not all. It's going to affect you in other ways, too. Higher interest rates on your variable rate mortgage, your auto loan, your credit card loans, and every other penny you borrow. Makes you wonder what the agenda was, okay? Reich says S&P has downgraded the U.S. because it doesn't think we're on track to reduce the nation's debt enough to satisfy S&P, and we're not doing it in a way Reich says that S&P prefers. But Reich basically says if Standard & Poor's is so concerned, then why didn't they downgrade the credit ratings in the first place of all the agencies and companies that got us into this mess from the very beginning? In other words, what is the true agenda of Standard & Poor's? Apparently, S&P gave AAA ratings to some of Wall Street's riskiest packages of mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations. That is the dumb stuff that led us into this mess in the first place. The question, why didn't S&P do its job then and protect the American public? Why didn't it warn investors about the level of risk that Wall Street was taking on? If they had, this is what Robert Reich says, if they had, the housing and debt bubbles wouldn't have become so large, their burst wouldn't have brought down so much of the economy. But they didn't. They didn't care because these are the very people and companies, and this is my opinion, that the insurance companies, the investment firms, all of them, that S&P is trying to protect. That's because their agenda is a political and a classist agenda. Very clear. We're talking Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo. We're talking all the big banks, Bank of America, and the fact is these are banks that have been sued by cities. For example, for their practices towards African Americans. The federal government has sued them for these horrible loans that they put out there, the way they decimated the housing market. They've paid tens of millions of dollars in fines for this. And you mean to tell me to this day these banksters have not been downgraded by S&P? See, it doesn't make sense. Keep that in mind and know that the agenda is a classist agenda with some racial overtones. That's what we're fighting, folks. Get busy. It is a class war. Get in it and fight or we'll lose it. All right, also, word on those rich private jet owners that President Obama wants to tax. Apparently the wealth of these, you're not going to believe this. The wealthy get these private jets so they don't have to deal, of course, with the privacy issues, also with long lines at the airport that the rest of us have to deal with. So what they do is they'll go out and they'll pay, as one man did, this is how much money they pay for this, $146,000 for 25 hours of flight time on a private jet. They pay for a jet card. It gives them access to an 8-person Learjet for 25 hours over 275 days, almost a year. It's called fractional jet ownership, and folks, it is on the rise. Fractional jet sales increasing almost sixfold, and that's just in the first quarter compared with the first quarter a year earlier. We should tell you that we're talking about, for example, companies like Flight Options. That's the company that had its fractional jet ownership increase almost sixfold in the first quarter. Flight Options. We should also tell you that fractional sales at Bombardier, that's Bombardier stock symbol BBD, that company's FlexJets, we should tell you that fractional sales there jumped 64%. We should tell you that flying from New York to San Francisco on an 8-person 45XR would use about 14 hours or $92,000 from a one-year FlexJet 25-hour card. It would also cost an additional $19,000 for fuel to total about $111,000 to go to New York. We should tell you that compares with about $10,000 for 4 first-class round-trip tickets for the same trip only later in the month. Meanwhile, we want to tell you this, travelers, you and I, Basic travelers, we should tell you we have lost accessibility to business hubs and favorite vacation spots as commercial airlines are cutting their flights amid higher fuel prices and, of course, declining corporate travel because they're on the private jets. That's right. Now, we're not telling them they shouldn't get on the private jets. You can spend your money any way you want to. We're just saying that if we're going to protect everybody, if we're not going to be a classist system, and we're going to protect everybody, we have to let people do whatever they want to do with their money, i.e. fly the corporate jets. But they cannot be subsidized to do this. They got to pay a tax in order to do it. We should tell you that U.S. commercial airlines ranked last among 47 industries in customer satisfaction. That is according to the University of Michigan's American Customer Satisfaction Index, and it was released in June. We should tell you that on average, 21.5% of major commercial carriers' flights were delayed this year through May, and that is according to the U.S. Department of Transportation. So as the rich are able to siphon themselves out of the regular commercial flight system, it is taking the system down. The quality is going down. Everything is going down. That's why we have to just tax them. That's all. Just tax them. They'll either fly corporate, fly commercial, or we'll get the money that we need to run the economy the way we need to run it. In labor news, a strike, about 45,000 workers at U.S. telecommunications giant Verizon Communications, they're on strike. Unable to reach an agreement on new contracts, Verizon says of the strike that it has already trained tens of thousands of managers, retired workers, and others to fill in for the striking staff. The union is the Communication Workers of America. It says it had taken the unprecedented step of striking Verizon because Verizon continued to strip away 50 years of collective bargaining gains for middle-class workers and their families. Verizon, you should know, employs about 200,000 people. In crime, and over the weekend, polygamist Warren Jeff's nephew testified during his sentencing phase. Niece and nephew both testifying during the sentencing phase. Jeff was convicted last week on 2 counts of sexual assault on a child. The niece and nephew reportedly talking about the alleged abuse they suffered at Jeff's hand. Brent Jeffs, who's 28, told jurors that his uncle raped him when he was just 5 years old. The niece said that she described an incident that allegedly occurred between her and Jeffs when she was just 7 years old. The leader of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints faces a maximum sentence of life in prison on his conviction of sexually molesting a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. They were his spiritual wives. Looking at cybercrime, drip, 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 they take a few thousand here, a few thousand there, and it all adds up to cyber crooks stealing as much as $1 billion a year from small and mid-sized bank accounts in the U.S. and Europe. Apparently, organized crime is targeting small companies, school districts, and local governments. That's because they maintain large commercial bank accounts protected by basic security at community or regional banks, and their accounts typically are not covered by insurance as individual accounts are. Now, they take by just 3 of these cybercrime gangs is about $100 million a year each. That's just 3. Okay? Finally today, get this, a new Gallup poll says 30% of U.S. Christians approve of killing civilians, while Muslims and atheists are most likely to reject violence. The poll was taken to gauge religious and non-religious attitudes towards violence a decade after the 9/11 attacks. And the numbers don't lie. Muslims and atheists are apparently most likely to reject violence. The Gallup survey of 2,482 Americans found that 78% of Muslims believe that violence resulting in the death of civilians is never justified. Some 56% of atheists, 39% of Catholics, and 38% of Protestants agreed. When asked if it was okay for an individual person or a small group of persons to target and kill civilians, 89% of Muslims, 76% of atheists, and 71% of Protestants and Catholics answered no. To put it another way, nearly 30% of Christians surveyed believe it is acceptable to target and kill civilians. Those are your stories. I'm Carol Angela Davis for your Reality News Check for August 8th, 2011. See you tomorrow, same time, same place, new stories. Have a good day. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter, @CarolAngelaD. Have a good day.